they took the alcohol ration on and they made it the fundamental or the central part of their day-to-day lives in the trenches. But it's both while they were in the front lines, while they were in the rear areas, and before battles, that there were kind of elaborate rituals that went along with the distribution of wine in each of these three areas. There were certain artifacts that became symbols of the French wine effort. I actually have one here. This is the quart. It's a quarter-liter tin cup. Every soldier was supposed to get about 2 of those a day of wine. They carried this thing, which became actually a symbol of the French war effort, the bidon, the French wine canteen. This is the 2-liter variety. This one's interesting in that it's in pretty good shape. Soldiers used to fire blank cartridges into their bidon, which would make them blow up without actually piercing them. So they'd be able to get maybe 3.5 liters instead of 2. They could kind of work around the system like that. And these two symbols were so important that, I don't know if you can see this, but young men who were counting down the days to their mobilization actually got these little trinkets. It was kind of like, the 25 days to Christmas, where you can open up a thing every single day until you get to Christmas, and what you had was a year's worth of paper, and you count down the days till you became the right age, until you turned 19 and could join the French army. And attached to every single one of these was a miniature little cup. And so this idea of, or this image of the French soldier who was driven by drink was popularly ingrained in French culture, more or less permanently. When you think of the French trench fighter, they were called les poilus, which means the hairy ones, because it was hard to bring water up and shave, so most of them tended to grow beards. He's nearly always pictured with his bidon and his quart, and in trench journals, which were kind of printed by soldiers at the front for distribution among their regiment or their units. There are poems, pictures, stories, all revolving around drinking, that, strangely enough, like the Germans, their enemy, seem to be much less important in their day-to-day lives than getting alcohol. One of the most famous memoirs of the war, a soldier named Louis Barthas, who fought with the 258th Regiment of Infantry. The first time he ever saw a German soldier, and I think maybe the only time, was when the soldier was brought in. He was captured during a trench raid. And when he saw this German soldier, instead of feeling this kind of rage towards him, he wrote in his journal that what he really wanted to do was take this German aside, sit down with him and share a bottle of wine and make friends with him. That these guys barely ever saw the enemy. The violence that was inflicted upon them was coming from artillery barrages that were fired from miles away from the front. And there was not a sense of hatred or hostility often between the French and the German soldiers across the lines. There's a British historian named Tony Ashworth who wrote a great book about this, that for the most part during the war, the British and the Germans entered into a kind of tacit agreement where they would fire into the same positions at the same time every single day. And both sides would know not to be there. And that way they could meet their shell quotas when their commanders came around to make sure that they had fired enough of their shells. And that way nobody actually was hurt. So there's this kind of elaborate system of tacit alliances, or of not alliances, but of an agreement to restrain violence. Because the violence, interpersonal violence in the way that it was practiced in the First World War was so horrendous that both sides often would prefer to avoid it altogether.